This is the Baseball Tonight podcast for Wednesday, August 12th, 2026, presented by La Quinta by Wyndham. I'm Buster Olney on my way to New York for our game broadcast of the contest between the Seattle Mariners and the New York Yankees. Taylor Schwenk is working from back in Bristol. Today, we'll be talking with Karl Ravech about his recent conversation with former Red Sox manager Alex Cora and new Yankees shortstop George Lombard. And Jorge Castillo gives the backstory to how Freddy Peralta facilitated a summit between Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor to address their icy relationship. Let's get to it. Jorge Castillo covers baseball for ESPN. And Jorge, this is a good old-fashioned baggage claim Tuesday. I'm in the Minneapolis airport in one of those pods, the sun shining through, from the rising sun shining through in the east. And you are in New York, where there happens to be a lot of construction.
Yes, sir, Buster. Perfect timing. They just started pretty recently this morning here in my building. So perfect New York City podcast to get this going.
What's the tool you're imagining that they're actually using here? Because I'm thinking it's like a drywall cutter.
Yeah, I don't know. Kind of sounds like a jackhammer, but I don't think it is. But yeah, it's pretty loud this morning. Luckily at 10:50, not at 7:50.
But you're a pro and you will work through it. So I appreciate you doing this with me. All right, let's talk about George Lombard Jr., who, I mean, right away, an impact player for the Yankees. I feel like I've watched most of the innings since he was promoted to the big leagues and seen a lot of the plays. Man, and I don't expect he's going to hit at the same level, batting, close to 400 early on, OPS over 1,000. I don't expect that to keep on, but the defense is crazy good. What are you seeing?
I think his floor is really high. I think just given his defense and the makeup, the maturity, he's 21 years old, son of a former big leaguer, George Lombard Sr., who's the Detroit Tigers bench coach, obviously. I just think that the floor is really high, and the question is, how high is this ceiling? Because defensively, he's there, he belongs there, he fits right into that clubhouse. Teammates are already marveling at his maturity. The question is, how well is he going to hit? Because we saw it in AAA there the last couple of weeks. He tore it up in AAA. He forced his way up to the major leagues at this point. No, and Anthony Volpe also came with a lot of height. But Anthony Volpe, I think the floor, frankly, was just lower. He wasn't as good defensively. His arm wasn't as good. His range wasn't as good. And he also the question was, we kind of assumed he was going to hit. He never hit. He never hit. But I think the floor for Lombard is really high. And I think he just makes the Yankees a better team. Defensively, they're just better. They have that guy at shortstop who can make all the routine plays look really routine, and he can make difficult plays look routine as well. And the Yankees' motto for years and years and years, Buster, this is being strong up the middle. And now they have a guy in Lombard, a Gold Glove caliber, in my opinion, shortstop, who's going to fit in. Now, what happens offensively when the book goes out on him eventually, right? Eventually, these pitchers are going to figure out, okay, this is his weakness. This is what we got to do to him. Eventually, he's going to find some adversity. How does he overcome it? What adjustments does he make? And I think this is a kid who can make the adjustments and at least be a solid to good to great hitter in the majors. I think the floor is just really high.
Because he has some command of the strike zone, and that's a plus, right? I mean, he'll draw some walks. That's what jumped out to me. Even when he was struggling offensively in AAA, he was still getting on base quite a bit, which tells you that even in these early struggles, and I totally agree with you, at some point, opposing pitchers, they'll develop a book on him. Early on, he's done well against breaking balls. He struggled against some fastballs. Maybe they start pounding with fastballs. Maybe, the average and the power, that's not there. But I still think he's going to get on base. And in some ways, I don't think it matters as much for the Yankees once they get everybody back. Cody Bellinger comes back and Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton, then you can live with one or two hitters at the bottom of your lineup who aren't necessarily contributing on a regular basis offensively because his defense is so good. Jorge, in recent days, and I, working on a story, in recent days, I've been reaching out to a lot of different evaluators to say, give me a comp for him on defense at shortstop. And what's been so interesting is a lot of the people I speak to have a hard time finding it because he's so big on one hand, and yet he's so agile. And they're like, Miguel Tejada was big physically, but he's not as good of a defender. And they're saying, Troy Tulowitzki, but it was a different type of defense. I covered Derek Jeter. Derek never had the range to his left the way that George does. And George, and we're going to talk about this on our Wednesday broadcast, George makes one play in particular that I can't remember seeing another shortstop make, which is when he goes to his left, and rather than spin, which we've seen guys like Cal do and Troy Tulowitzki, he will uncork a throw without doing the spin, and he'll adjust and he'll throw to first base. It actually, and I was texting with a longtime coach the other day, and I said it reminds me a little bit of, and I'm going to date myself here, when Dan Marino was a quarterback with the Miami Dolphins. This really unusual quick release from within his body, and yet had so much power on it. I can't think of a shortstop who does like that. I talked to Damon Oppenheimer, the head of scouting for the Yankees, and I asked him for a comp, and he went back to Gary Templeton, like in the 70s and 80s, because he, like a lot of people, struggling to find comps for someone so big and yet so agile.
Yeah, the throwing arm reminds me a bit of Mason Wynn. Mason Wynn is not as big as Lombard, but one thing that Mason Wynn's arm's incredible, and one thing that Aaron Boone has made the point of saying over the last week since Lombard's come up is he doesn't have to reach back too far. He just goes, it's just quick, it's just boom, 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 and that's one thing that's really stuck out defensively to Aaron Boone and really the Yankees as a whole. First game he's turning that double, not turning the double play, starting the double play to ranging to his right backhand. It was a great play, and a type of play, frankly, Paul O'Neill said this on the Yes broadcast. The type of play the Yankees infield was not making for the entire season until George Lombard showed up. And the other part of George Lombard's game, you mentioned the plate discipline, something that really stuck out to me over the weekend. Usually, young guys show up in their first few days of the big leagues. They're a little timid. They're not going to challenge, right? I don't want to challenge, make a mistake, look bad. This kid challenged twice in one at bat and worked a walk with that. And he's very confident. He knows the strike zone. He knows what he's doing. It just seems like he doesn't really feel pressure. Now, pressure's going to come, down the stretch here for the Yankees. They're trying to catch the Rays for the division title. They're trying to win the first World Series since 2009. Pressure will come, but so far this kid just looks like he just looks the part.
That's a great point about the confidence. We talked about this recently about if you look at the leaderboard of challenges, the volume of challenges, guys at the top of the list, Sal Stewart, who is like the ultimate extrovert in baseball, Jose Caballero, Bryce Harper, like these guys are really confident. And so I do think there's some reflection. Jose Altuve is among those who, even though he can speak with a lot of humility, you can't be as good as he's been at 5'5.5" or whatever he is without having a lot of confidence. And so it has been fascinating watching his first days. I think I get asked the question, I'm sure you do too. He said, look, there is a path through which if the Yankees get there, if Judge is good when he comes back, this could be a really dangerous team by the time we get to the playoffs. What do you think?
I think they would be the best team in the American League if Aaron Judge gets back to being Aaron Judge, which is a big ask right now because he's not been cleared for baseball activities. He hasn't played a game in over 2 months. We're going on 10 weeks.
Yep.
Here where he hasn't played in a game. And, Giancarlo Stanton is progressing, but, we know Giancarlo Stanton's always one tweak away from not from being set back another month or so. So Cody Bellinger, he's supposed to come back here in the next couple of weeks. That will be big for the Yankees. But I think if the Yankees get those 3 guys back, healthy, rolling, to me, this is the best team in the American League. They're winning these games 2-0, 3-2, 2-1. They're winning all these tight games because the pitching has been that good. And one side effect of that could be these leverage arms could tire down the stretch here. Aaron Boone has had to go to these guys quite a bit. The Bednards, the Cruzes, the Blackburns, the Hedricks. These guys are getting tired. It's just, they're human beings. These guys have been throwing a ton of, not just innings, but, big, like close games. That takes a lot of effort, a lot of strain. And I just wonder, if that's going to catch up to the Yankees. But the starting rotation, Carlos Rodon is on his way back. Max Fried recently returned. Eventually, Ryan Weathers and Will Warren will be in the bullpen in the postseason. That's going to be a big boost. And Clark Schmidt as well, who's on his way back. So I think the Yankees, there's a lot of moving parts here. A lot of things have to go right. But if most of these things go right, the Yankees, to me, are the best team in the American League. They have the most talent. Obviously, the Rays, the Red Sox, and I think the Tigers have been I know they just traded Tarek Skubal, but then playing great baseball, and they've been, you can argue, the best team in the American League for the last couple months. So I think those 3 teams, and then the Tigers sort of as the wild card, are the best teams in the American League.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any question. The most underrated team in that group you talked about are the Rays. There's a lot to love about the Rays. When you're talking about, one of the premier power hitters in baseball, Junior Caminero, Yandy Diaz, at the consistent force at the top of their lineup. Chandler Simpson just gets better and better. I love the trade they made for Freddy Peralta. I had an evaluator with another team tell me, look, Freddy Peralta in the Trop will be a great fit. Not only will the Rays be good with him on adjustments, but four-seam fastball guys with riding fastballs, they typically do well in the Trop. Drew Rasmussen, one of the more underrated guys. Nick Martinez, same thing. Like, that is a legitimately good team. But I just, you were talking about floors and ceilings. I think the Yankees ceiling is a little bit higher if all of these things work out.
The floor is the lowest as well, in my opinion, because if these things don't work out, if Judge doesn't come back or he comes back and he's not himself, if Stan doesn't make it back or something happens where he has a setback and, when he gets back or whatever, there are a lot of things. Rodon, we're assuming Rodon's an elbow injury. We're assuming Rodon's going to be fine. We're assuming Clark Schmidt's going to come back and be fine. We're assuming just a lot of things. Soft tissue injuries for Bellinger and Stanton. It's just a lot to assume. But I think, upgrading at shortstop with Lombard, that's pretty significant. But ultimately, to win the World Series, the Yankees need Aaron Judge.
All right, I want to ask you about a story that you had recently that Freddy Peralta, before he was traded to the Rays, facilitated a powwow with Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor, which was the most tangible reporting that I've seen of all these things we sort of heard around the edges, that Lindor and Soto were not close, that they had some issues. The fact that a veteran player like Freddy Peralta saw a problem to that degree tells you this was a thing. What did you learn?
Yeah, so Freddy Peralta, he came over with sort of two things that we were told about Freddy Peralta. Number one, he's a really good pitcher because all the numbers and history says it. This year, obviously, in New York, he was not very good at 5 ERA. But behind the scenes, he's a clubhouse connector. He is beloved by all his teammates. He's a clubhouse leader. And that part really showed up here with the Mets. And from what I understand, Lindor and Soto, this is not a secret. They've had a frosty, icy relationship since Soto came on board last year. It's obvious in how they interact, or they don't interact, or didn't interact on the field for much of last season. Going into this season, pregame introductions on opening day, they all had handshakes and hugs and all this stuff for every teammate except for themselves. It was just one little dap, and that was it. And I was like, okay, this is still an issue. It's obvious. And once I caught wind of this, first of all, on July 1st, Steve Cohen on a podcast said that this is last year's issue. This is the first time someone with the Mets acknowledged on the record, the owner of the team acknowledged that this was an issue. He said, this is last year's issue. From my understanding, they're doing a lot better now. So that really was like, okay, something's up here. So, I poked around. And what happened was Freddy Peralta, clubhouse connector, a guy who's beloved by everyone, bilingual, all this stuff. Obviously, you don't need a bilingual for, Lindor and Soto. They both speak Spanish. But he brought them together. He was like, you know what? Let's do this. This is as men, not baseball players. Let's have this session. I was told it was for over an hour. And I was told that since then, it's been better. This happened in June. Steve Cohen spoke on July 1st. The trade deadline happened, obviously, pretty recently. And Peralta was traded to Tampa. But I've been told it's been better between them. And you can tell, you can see if you look for them, they're interacting more. They're smiling at each other, talking to each other. And I know it's silly. Fans are like, why do we care? This is a media creation. If a player that decides that you guys need to get together and figure things out, it's not a media creation. It's a problem. And the owner of the team, Steve Cohen, said it was an issue and that it's no longer an issue. So Freddy Peralta, his legacy here in New York on the field, 5 months of not pitching well, but off the field, I would argue he really could have set this franchise on the right path forward. If these two guys can get along and coexist.
What's so interesting about it was that, when we heard rumblings of this during the 2025 season, my response, I remember saying this on New York radio, was like, well, there's basically one person who can deal with this directly, and that is Steve Cohen, who paid both of these guys a lot of money. Someone's told me that Cohen made some effort, at some point during 2025, over the winter or something like that. But this, and especially knowing both guys, Juan Soto, super smart guy, obviously, future Hall of Famer. And my experience with Francisco Lindor is he comes through the clubhouse doors every day. He posts, he works at it. I'm shocked that this wasn't dealt with before Freddy Peralta came on board. I mean, these are two really smart guys.
It could have been the type of thing if if maybe Cohen did do something over the offseason or last season. They thought it was behind them, and they report this year. It's like, oh, wait, this is not exactly behind us. And Peralta's new here. And Peralta's a veteran, and Peralta has some cachet. And Peralta can say, hey, guys, this is stupid. What are we doing here? Let's talk about, and that's the thing. I don't know what exactly the issue is between Lindor and Soto. There's been a lot of rumors, nothing that's been confirmed to me by enough people, or I'm not going to hear and speculate. I'm not going to speculate as to why Lindor and Soto have not gotten along, not had the best relationship, but it was an issue. And Peralta came in and said, "Let's figure this thing out," and he did it. And well, at least as of right now, they seem like it's a lot better. And the Mets, Soto's not playing right now. He's going to come back eventually, and the Mets are winning baseball games right now, Buster. I don't know if you noticed that they're playing spoiler right now after this huge trade deadline where they traded pretty much their entire bullpen and a couple starters. So the vibes are a lot better in Queens.
So how do they move forward with this this situation? Do you feel like it's actually behind them, or because all of that led to the trade deadline, and the first reports come out from reporters who are super connected with the organization would be one way to put it, and it was made clear that all the players are available except for Juan Soto and the young guys, the Nolan McLean. And my first question was like, why would they put that out there about Lindor? What's the point of that? And an executive with another team said to me, well, they just want to get an early feel on what teams might be interested in him sometime during the wintertime or before the 2027 season, whenever that starts. Because I'm like, you're not going to be able to move him. Like, given the amount of money owed to him, given the fact he hasn't had a great year, given the uncertainty about the labor situation, what the financial system is going to look like next year, what would be the purpose of putting his name out there? And that was the most plausible explanation that I've heard, that they just wanted to, okay, who might have sent back feelers that they'd be interested in talking about this guy?
Yeah, from what I was told that they weren't going to move him. There was 0% chance they were going to move him.
Why would they put it out there then?
Maybe for that reason. You want to see who's possibly interested in not only a future Hall of Famer, a really good shortstop, though he's regressed defensively a bit this year. He's hitting again. But his contract is huge. And given we don't know the state of, the economic financial system of baseball next year, maybe this is a post-lockout type of thing if they really want to get into whether they can move him or not. But I think it doesn't hurt, right, to figure out who's out there, who's possibly could use or would want a Francisco Lindor for the next few years. So, that doesn't hurt. From what I was told, they were never going to move him. They didn't even ask him to waive his no trade. They never approached him about this. It was just, I don't know where that came from, but from what I was told, it was never an option.
Okay. All right, Jorge. Well, thanks for doing this. Always great to talk with you. I always learn something.
Thank you, Buster. Appreciate it.
The weekly guest is brought to you by 8 Sleep, and our weekly guest is Karl Ravech. My first question, okay? You're going to be the play-by-play man tomorrow night. I was drawing up a list last week of the most surprising things in baseball, and here's where I landed. Number one for me, Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s struggles. It's just utterly shocking after what we saw last year in the postseason. Number 2 are the Mariners. Like, I look at their team, and you look at the players, and I just can't figure it out. Number 3 are the Mets. Where would you have your top surprises in baseball this year?
Yeah, I think we had this conversation last year around the MVP, and the Cal Raleigh conversation was, if he doesn't get it this year, it feels like it's impossible for a catcher to replicate what he did last year, meaning this year. Now, to me, the biggest surprise, or one of, I would put him above Vlad Guerrero. I think there have been some injuries, but given the 60 homers and the season that he had, I would expect a drop-off. Unfortunately for him and the Mariners, I would never have expected what he's doing this year. And again, it may be attributable to the injuries, but the idea that he's not hitting for power, he's not getting on base, he's not doing anything that he did last year to be considered, a number 2, if not number 1, American League most valuable player. So he's at the top. The Mariners, interestingly, and having covered the sport as long as you did, the teams of the 90s, as the Mariners just celebrated their 50th celebration. The teams of the 90s, early 2000s were arguably, to me, the biggest surprise to not win a World Series. So the Mariners, I find in both conversations, I was shocked back then that they didn't win it all. And I'm really surprised at how far Raleigh and subsequently the team have fallen this year.
Yeah, Julio Rodriguez not had a good year. Josh Naylor has not been as
Yeah.
effective as he was when they traded for him. Brian Wu, his struggles on the road, it's just inexplicable, like how that's happened for sure. And I mean, especially, Karl, when you cast it against the landscape of a very mediocre American League. Like
Yeah.
the teams there, they're battling and now have fallen significantly behind. Houston and Texas, it's not like those are great teams.
Right. No, they look, every team in the American League has flaws, has injuries, pock marks on them. And in a year in which the Tigers, and as you mentioned, the Rangers and the Astros, and clearly the walking back from the dead Red Sox are indicative of a season in which a team like Seattle, with their really, really good pitching and their offensive capabilities, should very much be in a race. Now they're not dead yet, but they're not in the race right now, and that's a big surprise. Given it's almost as if every other team is sending out invites to the postseason party. Like, come on, get involved. Let's go. We're all here. We don't necessarily need any more, but boy, something's really wrong if you're not part of this. So they're inviting them in. Um, I think Buster, the truth is, when you look at where we are today, it's the Dodgers, the Brewers, and the Tampa Bay Rays. Like, the Rays are by far the best team in the American League, and they do all the things that the other teams don't currently do, which is pitch. They don't necessarily crush it for power, but boy, they get on base and cause all sorts of problems. They got a guy that closes every single game that he gets into. So it's a unique year. But yeah, it feels odd to be left off the boat when it leaves the dock in the American League.
So accept or reject this premise that I have. I mean, coming into the year, through a lot of this season, I looked at the Mariners as a sleeping giant when they were sluggish
Sure.
in May and June. I'm like, oh, watch the Mariners, sleeping giant, here they come. And by the way, I hear that same opinion when I talk to folks in other front offices, like, oh, at some point the Mariners are going to turn it on. I think right now, Karl, among all the teams, the Yankees to me are the sleeping giant. Because the question is, if you get Aaron Judge back, and he's
Yeah.
close to being what he's been, and now
Mhm.
that you've solved shortstop with George Lombard Jr., that to me, and I was just talking to Jorge Castillo about this, by the time we get to October, this could be a pretty good team.
Yeah, I mean, I think the premise that you're going on is similar to what the Dodger fans will tell you about this recent slump. Like, no, let's not worry when we get Glasnow and Snell back, and let's just see where we go because we believe we have the most talent. Um, if you're going to go sleeping giant, that excludes teams like Milwaukee and Tampa, who I think are giants. But absolutely, I mean, you look at the numbers that the Yankees pitching staff, and particularly the starting rotation, is putting up. And given the schedule that just came out, there are lanes that you would really only need 3 stud starters. They have them. The idea that Max Fried, Garrett Cole looks really good, and Cam Schlittler is as good as anybody not named Mizorowski, gives them hope. There's articles that have been comparing those 3 to sort of the David Cone years in which they had 3 really good starters, the Clemens Pettit years, whatever. They have 3, and if you can add Judge, absolutely. By the same token, if I'm a team like the Red Sox and Crochet is out there and Roman Anthony is out there, well, I think the teams that are gonna fortify themselves with healthy players, like the Yankees, but maybe like the Red Sox, um, maybe Seattle finds Cal Raleigh again. There's been no indication that's gonna happen. They all have it. They all have a legitimate chance. But yeah, I think Tampa's challenge will be the Yankees if they get healthy and if they perform, because you have to caveat it. Like, Aaron Judge coming back in September doesn't mean by October it's the Aaron Judge who hits 60 homers a year. Similar to pitchers, doesn't mean that they're going to immediately get back on the bike and be able to ride the two-wheeler like they did when they were healthy and playing every day.
Karl, I talked to Jorge about this too, that I have had a lot of fun. We'll talk about it in the broadcast on Wednesday night. Have had a lot of fun reaching out to evaluators around the sport, guys who've been in the game, 20, 30, 40 years, saying, give me a comp on George Lombard Jr. on his defense
Yeah.
because of how he plays. And guys are struggling because it's such a unique skill set. He's so big physically. He's as big as, a guy like Troy Tulowitzki, not quite as big as Cal Ripken, but he's a big shortstop, and yet he's so agile. And I mentioned that, I talked to Damon Oppenheimer, the director of scouting yesterday, and he was like, thinking about it, he said, I'm really going to date myself, Gary Templeton. Like he's going back to the 70s and 80s because you don't see shortstops who are like this. And the separator for me is that ability to make a throw when he's moving to his left, and he can still square up and face first base, and boom. And one of the scouts I talked to, I said, it reminds me, again, I'm dating myself, Dan Marino, back in the day as a quarterback, being able to make this short throwing motion and yet so much power. George Lombard Jr., who's a comp for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Jeter thing is real because I think what Lombard Jr. does and what we knew he would do, and one of the criticisms of current major league players, they lack the fundamentals. He has every single fundamental. I mean, I would compare him to one of the great soccer players out there like Messi because his footwork is so good. He never finds himself, knock on wood, it doesn't change, but he never seems to find himself out of position.
Yeah.
He makes the really hard plays look fairly routine. Nobody else, or very few others, Bobby Witt maybe, makes the plays that he makes, but you just don't worry like, oh boy, his feet are gonna be messed up. He's gonna not take a forehand when he should be taking a backhand. Like there's such fundamental expertise in everything that he does that you don't think he's gonna make a mistake. And if you're talking about having a shortstop or a second baseman or a center fielder who is not going to make a mistake, there's no greater luxury for a manager and certainly for the guy on the mound to think if it's hit on that left side, he's going to make the play. It's not going to be because he's not prepared, he's not in position, his arm isn't strong enough, his footwork isn't good enough. He checks all those boxes, and for somebody who's so young, um, that portends for another Yankee type run that they enjoyed, obviously, through the mid to early 2000s, late 90s.
And we'll address, I'm sure, the Jeter comp. And I've thought about it, having covered Derek for a lot of years. And you know this, the criticism of Derek was that his defense wasn't great. I don't think there's any question. George Lombard Jr. has significantly more range to his left than Derek did.
Yep.
But the thing that was so great about Derek, and you mentioned the fundamentals, when you talk to Red Sox people, through the years, Theo and others, they would tell you that that's the last guy in the world they wanted the ball hit to in the ninth inning. Because he was so confident that he was going to work it out. And they were like, yeah, it's a chopper in front of the shortstop. Derek will make the play. And I think Lombard has that. The other thing, too, that he has, and I mean, Derek was clearly a better hitter, in how he projects the beginning of his career. But Derek had it when he arrived in the big leagues in 1996, as a regular player for the first time. George has it, too. That's the confidence level, and that's what you're hearing from the coaching staff. Like, man, it's like he's been here for 20 years. And I guess he has to some degree because he grew up in clubhouses with his dad, George Lombard Sr., like our friend Eduardo Perez, just an absolute comfort level at the big league level.
Yeah, George was actually born with it. Like he came out of the womb and he had it. I think it might have been on his stomach. It just said IT. The truth is, as you mentioned, the dad and all the bloodlines there. But at any level, Buster, and I remember this with Jim Schlossnagle this past year in college. They had a freshman outfielder. His name is not currently in my brain, but they had a freshman outfielder who, when he walked onto the campus, he acted like he belonged. And you listen to comments from Judge and others when Lombard showed up at spring training or when he was first seen by the Yankees, like they knew he belonged. This is not too big. The stage isn't too large. The lights aren't too bright. When you are prepared your entire life to do one thing, there is no test that's going to be too big for you. The stage may change. It may start in Binghamton, New York, and go to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and go to ESPN, but there's still lights and cameras. And on our world, you're doing the same thing. You've prepared your whole life for it. He belongs. There's no question about it. And he belongs wearing the pinstripes. It's funny, you listen to the comments from Luis Garcia, who grew up and was born in New York and's got a million family members there. Wearing that uniform is a privilege, it's an honor, but it comes with, I think, an increased amount of accountability because of the pressure that being a Yankee puts on you. Not a problem for George Lombard Jr. And by the way, let's see when he has his first slump. Let's see when the error happens and how he deals with that, because this is a sport in which it's going to happen.
Yeah, and that's the ultimate test in baseball is the constant failure that these guys deal with. The negative feedback that they get. When we got done taping with Jorge, mentioned the other thing too is George Lombard Jr. He's fluent in Spanish. And he, Jorge hears him and he says it's not like someone who learned the language. You can tell it's their second language and sort of working their way through it. It's just like he really knows the language, which is going to help him be a leader.
No question.
As time goes on. All right, you are the host of the Dirt from the Dugout podcast, and recently you spoke with former Red Sox manager Alex Cora. What were some of your takeaways from that conversation?
Yeah, so I mean, the podcast is really designed to help parents and young players through the expertise and the journeys of these guys that come on as guests. And we had Cora on Monday night, and it was interesting. He was more, I'd say, open to talk about his experience in Boston than I thought he was going to be. And he went there. We didn't really go there because that's not what the podcast is designed for. My takeaway is he's in a very comfortable position. You know him. I don't know if you've seen him lately, but the smile, he radiates peace. He's in a very good place. He's around his family. He's in Puerto Rico. He's with his two twins. He's teaching them baseball. He's a lot looser than the stress of Fenway. And one of the questions that one of the viewers asked of him last night was, who was the manager or coach that put you under the most stress? And by that, who maybe taught you the most? And he thought about it and he said, Fenway Park, Boston. That was the most pressure. 162 games a year. Every game is like game 7 of the World Series. So he came to recognize that. He came to understand it. I'm sure he came to appreciate it and loathe it, but he was very clear about the expectations we talk about New York that he felt the green monster and the fan base in Boston put on him. And in a lot of ways, metaphorically, the green monster, when you're sitting there in the dugout and you're looking out there, it felt like he was telling us it was a monster, like a literal monster that can intimidate and scare and do all those things to you. So he was very open about the pressure. He talked about, communication, how important it is, and his frustration when sometimes it was brought up like we need to do a better job communicating. Well, oftentimes it's the entire company that needs to do a better job communicating. It's not just one person. So very open. I'm sure he will get back into the game. We didn't get into specifics of teams, but he did say both of his boys, Xander and Isander, have opinions on which team he should go to. They're not necessarily the same team, but he also mentioned, how important his partner has been in all this and in keeping him grounded and level-headed. It was a great conversation. It was wonderful to see somebody who's been, so important in our lives. He's a good man.
And that, again, the Dirt from the Dugout podcast, did you get a sense, our Eduardo, we always love to kick around the idea of what could Alex, because Alex is one of the few people in baseball who basically could do just, any range of jobs. He could be a coach if he wanted to, like his brother Joey. He could manage again. He could work in a front office. If he showed up as a general manager someplace, it wouldn't shock any of us who know him and have worked with him. And Eduardo's always put forward the idea that Alex at some point might wind up being a GM someplace. And I'm looking for, and I'll give you an example. David Stearns has had a rough, few years as head of baseball operations for the Mets. Maybe Alex Cora goes in there and is the GM. And works with David, especially Alex is someone who's been very front facing, dealt with the media a lot, big market, all that stuff. He checks every one of those boxes, and Eduardo's always talked about that. He thinks Alex could thrive in one of those jobs.
It seems to be a recurring theme of managers who are out of the managing profession for whether it's a short term or a long term. This is the Bill Parcells. If you're gonna sort of allow me to coach the team, you got to let me go into the store and buy some of the ingredients. I think a lot of the managers would like to have a bigger say in putting the ingredients together. Two things that came from the Dirt from the Dugout podcast last night. Joey Cora's influence on him is massive and has
Huge.
been since he was born, and he lost his dad when he was 13. The respect he has for Joey is off the charts, and Joey is a free agent as we speak. And look, I think to your point, and I wonder if this is a conversation that Alex could have, whether it's with David Stearns, whether it's with his good friend Dave Dombrowski in Philadelphia, whether it's with any organization. At some point, the current GMs may look at their shelf life and say, I don't really want to do this much more than 2 or 3 more years. What if we came to some agreement that you would come in, you would manage the team, and then when I leave, with the blessing of the owner, you can elevate yourself to general manager, and then you can hire the manager.
Whitey Herzog's path back in the day.
Is there a team, an organization willing to honor that type of request? And I have no idea if that's a path Alex wants to take, if there's a GM who'd be willing to have that person over their shoulder. But to your point, if that's what he truly wants to do, and the GM isn't currently, or president of baseball ops isn't currently ready to give that up, but they want Cora in their system, maybe there's a way to do that.
All right, Karl. I'll see you at dinner later, and I'm looking forward to doing the game with you again tomorrow night.
Me too, Buster. See you soon.
Thanks for tuning in. The Baseball Tonight podcast is presented by La Quinta by Wyndham. Tonight, La Quinta, tomorrow you shine. My thanks today to Karl Ravech, to Jorge Castillo, Taylor Schwenk, Deli, everybody back in Bristol who works on this show. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, and remember, hate and inequality based on skin color is something we need to fight against every single day.